Hello, good morning, Fáilte. I'm testing out some technology, and in the process I'm going to see if we can explore a little bit of this, my local graveyard in County Waterford. It's the Roundtower graveyard, called locally, I suppose. It doesn't have its own specific name, and there's a few other burial grounds in the parish, so it's the one in the village, and it's the most, well, it's one of the most historic, it's the most complex, very interesting. And I just want to see, does this particular camera work with the particular microphone? And in the process I want to start thinking out loud, because we're after getting funding for a management plan, to do a conservation management plan for the graveyard. And the work is going to take place this summer, and I just want to see, will this technology help us understand the place a bit better, get to know the place. We have, I'm just going to walk around the graveyard and I suppose think out loud. We've two ways of looking at these sites and two ways of talking about these sites, in my head anyway. The first is we look at the geography of the place, and secondly then we look at the biography of the place. What do I mean by geography? Well, the cathedral here that we're looking at, that's orientated east-west. So west is far over that way, east is over this way. So if we face towards the rising sun, that's our east. And even if I say this wee church here, that's a little shrine chapel, maybe the 8th century. I won't go into the dates now as such, but that's also orientated east-west. And if you to the right, those headstones are facing east. What does that mean? That means that if I look at that one there, the carving is here on this face. That's the head of the grave. When the coffin went into the ground, the coffin, the head end was down at this end and the feet are at that end. So that's the head of the grave, and that's the foot of the grave. And that headstone is facing east. And as I look back here, facing west, all of these headstones are facing me. So they're facing the rising sun behind my back. So the geography of the graveyard, the churches often tend to be east-west. The headstones are facing east because our coffins face east, if I can put it that way. And then because Irish graves are largely owned by the families who are buried in them, and we reuse those same graves, family plots develop. And when family plots develop, we tend to bury our people then in rows, because the big danger is you might cut into a grave that belongs to your neighbour. The way in which you ensure that that doesn't happen is you stick a grave marker on the head of your grave, and then you'll know, look, that's ours, and that's our 3 foot by 6 foot space or whatever. So in terms of the geography, facing east, the headstones facing east, burial rows, because we reuse the grave plots, are north-south. So they're all running there north-south, south to north. Then what we tend to find that also that most of the burials in a historic graveyard will be in the southern part of the graveyard. Here, this is our southern part of the graveyard. And if we were to count all these headstones, which we're going to do this summer, the densest concentration is going to be here south of the church. And north of the church it tends to be quite sparse, and that's the case here in Ardmore as well. So just going to go around and show you the north part of the graveyard now. So here we are in the north part of the graveyard, not very dense. That headstone there, very interesting, we'll come back to that later. James Quan had a very interesting story about that, all to do with the arm wrestle that takes place between Catholic and Protestant faiths. Here we are. If I was talking about the biography of a church, I'd be talking about finding the oldest structure, and then the oldest grave, and then following on to the next oldest, and so on. And if we're to look at that here, then here we are in one of the oldest parts of the church. Now here north of the church, there's lots of these little uninscribed grave markers. Why they're there like that, I'm not sure, but it's well filled. They're all a particular date. They're telling us something. We just haven't worked out what that is yet. And then here we also have a collection of inscribed stones to the north of the church. These people made a decision to get buried over here and to stick up their headstones and their family plots over here, and in time we'll decipher those. For now, we'll go into the cathedral. Gates left open. Here we are at the western end of the cathedral. The famous arcade is outside that wall there. She's quite big, but she's big alright. There's a central aisle. They're medieval. They're in the shape of graves. I'm not sure exactly what date they are. Maybe 12th, 13th, 14th century. But it's super wealthy in here inside in the cathedral. That may well be the top of the Roundtower outside. There's a modern rebuilt cap on the tower. And here we are in the nave of the cathedral. They reckon there's about 4 different rebuilding phases here. Okay. The fuges have been in this area for a while. Yeah, there it is. Here lieth the body of Mr. Thomas Fudge, F-U-D-G-E, also spelled Fuge, who departed this life March 17, St. Patrick's Day, aged 53. Can't see the year. We'll come back to all that. There's more fuges over there. There's only a couple of chest tombs here, and there's none outside in the graveyard, but here's one inside in the nave. And this is the older church. These massive stones there, see them? They're the remnants of the older church. This is telling me now that my internet connection is unstable. I'm not sure what that means. And here in the corner we have an ohm stone, and then another ohm stone there. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that now. My audio is after falling out, so good to practice on these. I'll stick him back in. Now, what do I do? I hit him, double click, that has him. So this fella is, I think he's potentially an early ohm stone, maybe, I think they say 6th century. There's a great website. We'll read this and one on the right. I think it's all the one. What's interesting is that there's Lugid. Lugid feels more older, pagan. Segamon then feels more Latin, so part of this whole new continental influence that's happening in Ireland with the arrival of Christianity in the 5th century and so on. This stone over here in the corner has a cross, apparently. It includes the Latin name Amatus. So very early features here. I reckon the church got a hammering because set up like in those days a lot of used for their military purposes when times got rough. And so we think a lot of this west gable is rebuilt then. So the lovely arcade that's outside, which won't look great when I go outside, that is, we'll see from that that's all rebuilt. Tygo O'Keefe is the fellow who wrote the article on that. Oh, look, I'm looking above, I don't know, we see them, the Ardmore swifts are up there. The swifts they're like blades in the sky. They have longer, narrower wings. I don't think they'll show in this video. I'll go around that end anyway and just have a quick sconce at the arcade. These buttresses were all part of the reconstruction, I'd say, after the siege. We think the reason that this building was damaged was that the native Irish forces were in that, we think the Tower House for Ardmore was there, where that rectory is, camping there, and here behind. That arcade I was talking about, famous element of Ardmore's heritage. We'll go into that in more detail. It's an important part of what we've got to assess. And now we come around to the southern part of the graveyard. We're looking into that eastern sun, that rising sun. And the rising sun is heating the stones. I always like that. We bury our beloved dead in these graveyards. And they face the rising sun and the sun warms them. Now, this wee stone, we're going to come back to this fella in the future. Simon Dowling. On destruction to the cathedral, it also, those big dints there are maybe not cannonball marks. So it's a battle site as well as a graveyard. And when we look at the geography of the site, that door there is supposed to be pointing, in an Irish tradition from the Roundtower, is supposed to be pointing to an older church somewhere down here. So is it pointing over there to the early church, or was there another church down here in this area here? Could you say it's pointing at the Benacon? Maybe you could. I'm not sure. That's the Benacon there, that left. Okay, so the old historic graveyard was expanded about 100 years ago, and the modern burials are all up here. All that section up there behind me. And they're all mapped back around 1920. They produced a map, and each plot there has a row identifier and a grave number, whereas down here they don't. This is the old medieval section, and it is a highly organised space. But what we're going to do during the summer is we're going to number everything. We're going to get names and dates of erection for all those stones, and then we're going to plot it, and we're going to see what decades that those stones were erected, and we work out have we got any earlier groups. For instance, these two stones there, they're catching my eye, and I'm wondering, are they potentially early? Okay, I'm going to leave it there. We're going to see now. By the time I get home, this should be saved. I should be able to access it on YouTube. If it works, I'll repeat the process, refine how to do it a bit better, and continue the process as we go through the summer, and try and work out the history of this place so that we can look after it and tell people about it in the future. So thanks for your attention. Any questions, feel free to ask in the comments, and hopefully we'll talk again.